Welcome back to the deep dive, where we take complex source material and turn it into insights you can actually use.
Think of it as your shortcut to being well-informed minus the information overload. We sift through the details so you don't have to.
Exactly. And today we are continuing our exploration of the Manual of Patent Examining Procedure, the MPEP, which is, well, the official guide for U.S. patent examiners and applicants. This is part of an ongoing educational series where we're providing focused overviews of specific sections, helping you better understand the procedural and legal framework governing U.S. patent law, one chunk at a time.
And our focus today brings us back to Chapter 1800, covering the Patent Cooperation Treaty, or PCT.
Right.
We're diving specifically into MPP Section 1871.
Right. And the title is Processing Amendments filed under Article 19 and Article 34 prior to or at the start of international preliminary examination. Bit of a mouthful.
It is, but it's a really important stage.
Okay, so let's unpack this section then. Our mission in this deep dive is to really get a handle on the rules, the timelines, and, the procedures surrounding amendments you can make during a very specific and crucial window in the PCT process.
Yeah, that window right before, or just as, that international preliminary examination phase kicks off. And we're sticking strictly to the MPP excerpts provided.
Good. So before we get into the how and when of processing these, let's clarify what kinds of amendments we're even talking about here in the PCT context.
Okay, so the sources highlight two specific types, Article 19 amendments and Article 34 amendments.
Right. Article 19, remind me, that's the one tied to the search report.
Exactly. Think of Article 19 amendments as your first chance to react specifically to the International Search Report, the ISR. These are limited, though you can only change the claims of your application.
Okay, only claims after the ISR. Got it. And Article 34.
Article 34 amendments are broader. These are the ones you make during the Chapter 2 phase itself, the International Preliminary Examination phase.
So Chapter 2 is where Article 34 happens, and broader means?
It means you can amend not just the claims, but also the description and the drawings. More flexibility there.
Okay, now, these amendments, Article 19, Article 34, they're usually voluntary, right? The applicant chooses to file them.
Yes, typically submitted voluntarily by the applicant, and there's usually a pretty clear strategic reason why you'd want to do this.
Like responding to what the search found?
Absolutely. You've just received the International Search Report, maybe with an initial opinion on patentability, pointing out some prior art. These amendments are your chance to, well, strengthen your application proactively.
So you might narrow the claims down a bit.
You might narrow your claims to better distinguish them from that cited prior art, yeah. Or maybe correct some ambiguities the search report mentioned, or just clarify the scope of your invention before the examiner starts the detailed preliminary examination.
It's kind of like getting a sneak peek at the examiner's initial thoughts.
Exactly.
And getting a chance to adjust your strategy before the main event.
You got it. It's a chance to put your best foot forward and maybe, just maybe, influence the outcome of the International Preliminary Examination Report, the IPER.
Okay, makes sense. Now, there's a fundamental rule that governs any amendment in patent practice, and the material really hammers this home for PCT too.
Oh, yeah. And it absolutely cannot be stressed enough. These amendments, whether Article 19 or 34, must not introduce new matter. Nothing beyond what was in your application when you first filed it.
No new matter. That sounds simple, but why is it so incredibly critical right here at this international PCT stage?
Well, think about it. The PCT application is the foundation for getting patent protection in potentially, dozens of countries.
Right.
Any amendments you make during this international phase, they travel with the application into every single national phase you enter later on.
Okay.
So if you slip up and introduce new matter here, that mistake, that defect, it taints the application globally. It can be grounds for rejection or even invalidation in national offices all around the world.
Wow.
Getting this right now is absolutely crucial for the entire future life of your potential patent.
Okay, so no pressure, but don't add new matter. Got it. So MPP Section 1871, the section we're focusing on, really zooms in on the procedural side, the when and how the USPTO, when it's acting as the International Preliminary Examining Authority, or IPEA, actually handles these amendments.
That's right. And timing is incredibly sensitive here. particularly for those Article 19 amendments. The MPP lays out some very specific procedures depending on when you file them relative to when you file the demand for international preliminary examination.
The demand being the thing that kicks off Chapter 2.
Right, exactly. That's the trigger.
Okay, so tell me more about that timing sensitivity. What's the issue?
Well, let's say you submit your Article 19 amendments after you've already filed the demand. You've already asked for the examination to start.
Okay.
In that situation, the MPP says you should ideally, anyway, send a copy of those amendments directly to the IPEA. So directly to the USPTO if they're your IPEA.
Why directly? Doesn't everything go through the main international bureau?
It does, eventually. The International Bureau, the IB in Geneva, gets a copy of everything filed. But there's a processing delay, right? They have to log it, process it, and then forward it to the relevant IPEA.
Ah, so sending it directly avoids that delay.
Precisely. It's all about efficiency and making sure the examiner has the latest version of your claims right from the get-go. If the IPEA doesn't get the Article 19 amendments directly from you, they're instructed to just wait. They'll wait for the IB to forward them.
And that waiting, that could delay the actual examination starting.
It absolutely could. Or the examiner might even start reviewing the application without having your latest claim set the very claims you intended them to examine based on the ISR findings.
Not ideal.
Not at all. Receiving the amendments directly means the examiner starts their work with your clarified claims, which could lead to a more favorable or at least more efficient examination right from the start. It minimizes potential delays in getting that IPR issued.
So it's a small procedural step, sending that extra copy, but it could have a pretty significant impact.
It really could. Timely delivery is key.
Okay. What about the format of these amendments? Does how you present them matter?
Oh, it matters a great deal, especially for Article 19 amendments. The sources are very, very clear that if you're filing Article 19 amendments, the amended sheets must be clearly marked.
Clearly marked. How? What's the magic phrase?
The magic phrase is amended sheet, Article 19. It needs to say that right on the sheet. This isn't just, a helpful suggestion. It's a specific requirement laid out.
Okay. Amended sheet, Article 19. Got it. So what happens if you mess that up? If you forget the label or label it wrong?
Well, this is where a seemingly tiny detail can actually have procedural consequences. The MPEP says that if amendments are submitted without being properly marked amended sheet, Article 19, the IPA may treat them as Article 34 amendments instead.
Huh. Why does it matter? They're both voluntary amendments aimed at improving the application, aren't they?
They're both voluntary, yes, but they have slightly different context and timing implications, remember. Article 19 amendments are specifically your direct response to the search report, focused only on the claims.
Right, the ISR response.
Whereas Article 34 amendments, filed with or after the demand, are seen as part of your broader preparation for the examination phase itself.
Yeah.
If your Article 19 amendments kind of lose their specific Article 19 identity because they aren't marked correctly, the examiner might not immediately recognize them as your targeted claim response to the search results. They might just see them as general amendments.
That could change how they look at them.
It could potentially impact how the examiner prioritizes or interprets those changes. They might miss the specific strategic intent behind them. The applicant is narrowing this claim because of reference X from the ISR. This could maybe lead to unnecessary back and forth or just a less focused initial examination.
Wow. That's fascinating. Just a simple label can really shift how the examiner perceives and processes your work.
It highlights the importance of procedural details.
Definitely. Now, this section of the MPP also seems to show just how much influence an applicant actually has over the timeline of the international preliminary examination itself. It's not totally out of your hands.
Absolutely not. You have significant agency here. The start date for the international preliminary examination isn't just automatically fixed the second you file the demand.
Okay.
The MPP, and it points to PCT Rule 53.9 here, outlines several different procedural triggers or conditions that determine when the IPA examiner can actually begin their substantive work.
What kind of triggers or conditions are we talking about?
Think of them as signals or prerequisites. They include things like whether you've actually filed Article 19 amendments and whether they've been received by the IPEA yet, or whether you've explicitly asked for the examination to be postponed. That's another one.
You can ask for a postponement.
You can.
Yeah.
And also, whether you filed Article 34 amendments right along with your demand for examination. All these factors play into when the clock starts, so to speak.
Okay, this is where it gets really interesting, I think. You mentioned postponing. What if you know you want to file Article 19 amendments based on the search report, but you haven't quite finished drafting them yet, but you are ready to file your demand to get into Chapter 2?
Yeah, that's a common scenario,
Hmm.
and the rules allow for it. If you file your demand, and in that demand you explicitly request that the preliminary examination be postponed until after your Article 19 amendments are received.
You have to actually state that.
Yes, you have to state it clearly. If you do that, the MPP is clear. The IPEA must delay the start of examination until those amendments actually arrive. You essentially get to press pause for a specific reason.
So you can control the start date by signaling, hey, wait, I need to incorporate changes based on the search results first.
Exactly. You manage the timeline based on your amendment strategy.
So what's the flip side? What if you look at the search report and think, nope, my claims are fine as they are?
Good question. The flip side is if you file the demand and you make a clear declaration stating that you are not filing any Article 19 amendments.
Okay.
In that case, there's obviously no need for the examiner to wait for amendments that aren't coming. The IPEA is then free to start the preliminary examination earlier, assuming, all the other requirements are met.
That really shows how your strategic decisions and the specific declarations you make when filing the demand can directly shape the procedural flow and the timeline for your application's examination.
It absolutely does. It gives you levers to pull depending on your readiness and your overall strategy for the international phase. It's not a passive process at all.
Right, you're actively involved. Now, beyond the applicant's actions in these declarations, the MPP section also talks about the examiner's role and their discretion in handling amendments, particularly maybe ones that come in a little late.
Yes, that's covered too. Amendments that are filed after the application has already been formally assigned or docketed to a specific examiner may still be considered. It's not guaranteed, though.
Okay, so it's up to the examiner.
The MPP states it's at the examiner's discretion.
And how is that discretion usually used? Do examiners tend to accept these slightly later amendments?
Well, the sources suggest that this discretion is actually exercised quite often, especially if the amendments genuinely help improve the condition of the application for examination.
Improve the condition, like making it clearer.
Exactly. Amendments that clearly fix issues raised in the search report, or correct obvious errors, or significantly clarify the scope of the claims in a way that actually makes the examiner's job easier. Think about it. Examiners in the IPEA context want to produce a useful, high-quality IPR efficiently.
Makes sense.
So, well-presented clarifying amendments, even if they arrive a little bit late in that initial window, are often welcomed if they help achieve that goal.
Okay, good to know there's some flexibility there.
Yeah.
So we've talked about making the amendments, the timing, the format, the examiner's view, but what if you, the applicant, make a mistake in the amendment itself? You file your Article 19 or 34 amendment, and then you realize, oops, there's a typo, or maybe a claim dependency is wrong, something like that.
Right. Mistakes happen. Don't panic. There is a mechanism for fixing mistakes during the international phase. It's covered by PCT Rule 91.
Rule 91. Okay, what does that rule allow for?
Rule 91 is specifically for the rectification of mistakes. And it explicitly says that mistakes not just in the original application, documents, the description, claims, drawings, but also mistakes in any amendment filed under Article 19 or Article 34 can be corrected.
Ah, so you can fix errors in your fixes, so to speak. How does that correction process actually work? Do you just file a new amendment?
It's not quite automatic. Rectification under Rule 91 requires authorization from the competent authority.
Competent authority.
Who's that at this stage? At this stage, if international preliminary examination has already started and the application is sitting with the IPEA examiner, then they are the competent authority who needs to authorize the rectification of a mistake in an amendment you previously filed.
Okay, that makes sense. Whoever is currently handling the case needs to essentially sign off on correcting the mistake. So, all this amendment activity, the Article 19s responding to the search, the broader Article 34s, you controlling the timeline, the examiner potentially using discretion, even fixing mistakes in the amendments themselves, it's all building toward one major output from this whole Chapter 2 phase, isn't it?
That's right. That's the culmination of this whole stage. The ultimate goal of the international preliminary examination process is the issuance of the International Preliminary Examination Report, the IPEA.
The IPEA, and that gives an opinion on patentability.
Yes, it provides a non-binding opinion on the patentability of the claims as they stand after examination, taking into account the prior art found and any amendments that were considered.
And the sources mention that once that IPEA is issued, the documents associated with this examination start to become more accessible.
Yeah, that file doesn't stay locked away forever. Under PCT Rule 94.2, the documents in the examination file, which would include the IPEA itself, any written opinions, and any amendments that were processed, they can become accessible to the elected offices.
Elected offices being the national patent offices where you eventually decide to enter the national phase.
Precisely. Those offices can request access to the IPEA's file once the IPEA is done.
And potentially even the public can access it.
Yes, potentially. PCT Rule 94.3, and this is echoed in U.S. regulations like 37 CFR 1.1 FU G1, indicates that the contents of the International Preliminary Examination file can become accessible to the public, usually after the international publication of the application itself.
So everything you submit during this phase and everything the examiner writes, it eventually becomes part of the public record.
Down the line, yes.
Yeah.
Which really underscores the importance of getting things right during this stage, doesn't it? It's not just about getting a good IP year, but also about the record that will eventually be publicly visible.
Absolutely. Clarity, accuracy, strategic thinking about those amendments, it all seems paramount.
It really is.
You know, this section of the MPE, Section 1871, it really seems to drive home some key best practices and sort of policy expectations for applicants who are navigating this part of the PCT journey.
It definitely does. The big themes are, unsurprisingly perhaps, timely submission whenever you can manage it, and ensuring the completeness and accuracy of the record you're providing to the IPEA.
And we keep coming back to the strict requirements for how you actually present the amendments.
Exactly. This ties back into the general principles for amending any patent application, but the MPEP makes sure to reiterate them here in the IPEA context. You need to use replacement sheets, clean copies with the changes incorporated, not just marked up pages.
Okay.
You absolutely must provide an explanation of the changes you've made, detailing what was amended. And crucially, linking back to our earlier point, you must clearly indicate where the support for those amendments can be found in the original disclosure as filed.
Right. Got to show your work and prove you didn't add new matter.
Precisely. You have to point the examiner directly to the basis in the original application for any changes you're making to the claims or description.
And these presentation requirements, they aren't just, bureaucratic red tape. They serve a really critical purpose for the examiner, don't they?
Absolutely critical. These requirements are essential for making the international examination process efficient and maintaining high quality.
Mm-hmm.
By presenting your amendments clearly, explaining why you made them, and pointing directly to the support in the original filing, you make it much easier for the examiner to quickly understand what you've done, verify that it complies with all the rules, especially that crucial new matter rule, and move forward with the examination.
And that seems like it would align the goals of pretty much everyone involved. The applicant wants a smooth process. The examiner wants to do a thorough job efficiently.
It absolutely does. You could say the overriding goal of all these procedures, as laid out in MPP Section 1871, is really to facilitate that efficient, high-quality international examination with minimal unnecessary back and forth between the applicant and the IPEA.
Right.
This leads to a clearer, better examined application that's ready for national phase entry, which is ultimately in the best interest of both the applicant trying to get protection and the examiners doing the review.
So really digging into the specifics laid out in MPP Section 1871 isn't just about memorizing a bunch of rules. It's more about understanding the levers you have as an applicant, how you can influence the process, the potential pitfalls you need to watch out for, like new matter or improper formatting, and really appreciating how these procedural details can significantly affect not just the immediate examination, but the whole path and even the public perception of your international application down the road.
Well said. It shows that navigating this seemingly technical section is actually key to strategically managing your patent's journey through that really critical international preliminary examination phase.
Okay, I think that wraps up our deep dive into MPP Section 1871. Thanks for joining us for this exploration.
My pleasure. And we should give a special thank you to Mike Shepard, the creative director who organized this entire audio series.
Yes, absolutely. Disclaimer. Just a reminder, this summary of the MPEP was generated using AI tools, including ChatGPT and Notebook LM, and it might contain errors or omissions. It's provided for general educational and informational purposes only. It's definitely not legal advice or a substitute for formal instruction.
That's right. For authoritative guidance, please consult the official MPEP itself, a qualified instructor, or, of course, a registered patent practitioner.
Okay, so here's something to think about as we close.
All right.
We talked about strategic timing and clear formatting of amendments under Article 19 or 34. Could doing that really well beyond just meeting the basic procedural requirements actually do more? Could it potentially maybe build a bit of examiner goodwill? Could it influence the perception of your application's overall clarity and readiness?
Hmm, that's interesting. Giving you perhaps a subtle advantage not just in the IPR itself, but maybe even influencing how national phase examiners in different countries view the application when it lands on their desk later. Something to ponder.